In the winter of 1831, a black woman who had taught herself to read in secret was dragged to a whipping post in Virginia and given 100 lashes for the crime of teaching 47 enslaved people their letters. And as the whip tore into her flesh, she used her last conscious breaths to recite the alphabet, transforming punishment into one final lesson that would echo through generations. Her name was Sarah. And this is the story of how one black woman's courage planted seeds of liberation that would grow into forests of freedom. Before we begin this extraordinary journey into a forgotten chapter of resistance, I want to invite you to subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell. We uncover stories of courage, dignity, and the unbreakable human spirit every week. These are the histories that powerful people tried to bury, the black lives that changed the world quietly, powerfully, against impossible odds. Now, let me take you back to a Virginia plantation in 1828, where a revolution was happening in whispers. The Thornton plantation stretched across 2,000 acres of Virginia's Tidewater region, its fields thick with tobacco plants that grew fat on the labor of black hands that would never profit from the harvest. The main house stood 3 stories tall, white columns rising like monuments to wealth stolen from black bodies, built by black craftsmen who would never own property themselves. Behind that imposing structure, arranged in 2 rows, stood the quarters where 60 black families tried to build lives within the narrow spaces slavery permitted. 12 rough cabins housing people whose African ancestors had been stolen from homelands across the ocean, whose parents and grandparents had survived the Middle Passage and generations of bondage, whose children were born into a system that declared them property before they took their first breath. Sarah had been born in the 3rd cabin from the North End in 1801, delivered by her grandmother Dinah, a black woman whose healing knowledge came from African traditions passed down through whispered teachings. Sarah's mother, Ruth, was a black woman who worked in the main house as a cook, her dark hands creating meals that fed white mouths, while her own children received rations barely sufficient for survival. Her father, Samuel, was a blacksmith whose skilled dark fingers could shape iron into anything, tools and horseshoes and hinges, though he couldn't shape his own freedom. From her earliest memories, Sarah possessed qualities that would define her life. Her skin was deep brown, her eyes dark and penetrating, her hair thick and coiled, her mind sharp as any blade her father forged. She was a black child born into chains, but chains couldn't bind the fierce intelligence that burned behind her eyes. While other black children played between the cabin rows, Sarah watched everything. She observed how her father heated metal until it glowed, then shaped it with precise hammer strikes. She noticed which plants her grandmother harvested for medicines, knowledge that stretched back to African roots. She listened when black adults spoke in the evenings, absorbing stories about resistance, about people who'd escaped north, about Africa that lived in memory and song, even though none of them had seen its shores. Her mind worked like her father's forge, taking raw material and transforming it into something powerful, something dangerous to those who believed black people were suited only for labor. The defining moment of Sarah's childhood occurred when she was 7 years old. Master Thornton's daughter, Elizabeth, a white child Sarah's age, was learning to read with a tutor who came twice weekly from Richmond. Sarah's mother sometimes served tea during these lessons, and on one occasion she brought Sarah along to help carry the service. Sarah stood in the corner of the study, a black child holding the silver teapot, invisible to the white people in the room, watching Elizabeth struggle through a simple primer. The tutor, a white man named Mr. Crawford, pointed to letters and made sounds, then showed how those sounds formed words. Sarah watched with such intensity that she forgot to breathe, this black child witnessing magic that the law said she could never possess. Later that evening, after the work was done and the main house had gone dark, Sarah used a stick to draw shapes in the dirt outside her cabin. She was trying to recreate the letters she'd seen, attempting to capture their forms before they faded from memory. Her father found her there, this black child scratching symbols by moonlight, reaching for knowledge that white Virginia said black people couldn't comprehend. "What are you doing, child?" Samuel asked, his voice gentle but concerned. He was a black man who knew the dangers of what his daughter was attempting. "The white girl was making marks that meant words," Sarah explained, her dark eyes shining with wonder despite the fatigue. "The marks make sounds, and the sounds make meaning. Papa, if I could learn those marks, I could know anything. I could read the Bible. I could read the newspapers that say we're property. I could understand the words they use to keep us enslaved." Samuel knelt beside his daughter, his dark face serious in the moonlight. This black man who'd seen his own father sold south for teaching enslaved people to write their names understood exactly what his child was proposing. "Sarah, what you're talking about is dangerous. In Virginia, it's against the law to teach black people to read. If Master Thornton found out you were trying to learn, he could sell you away from us. He could have you whipped. The law says we're not supposed to be educated because educated black folks are dangerous black folks." "But why, Papa?" Sarah's voice carried the innocent confusion of a black child confronting the evil logic of racism. Why would reading make us dangerous? Her father was quiet for a long moment, this black man choosing words carefully to explain white supremacy to his child. "Because reading gives us power they don't want us to have. If we can read, we can learn about the world beyond this plantation. We can read about Haiti, where black people freed themselves. We can read about Africa before slavery. We can read the words that white people use to justify keeping us in chains, and we can see the lies in those words. They keep us ignorant because ignorance keeps us controlled. A black person who can read is a black person who can think, and black people who think are the most dangerous thing to slavery." Sarah absorbed this, and something fundamental shifted in her understanding. The prohibition against black literacy wasn't about protecting enslaved people from harm, it was about maintaining white power. And if reading was so dangerous to the system that kept black people enslaved, then reading must be the key to freedom. "Papa, I want to be dangerous," this black child said quietly. Her father looked at his 7-year-old black daughter and saw something that both frightened and inspired him. He saw determination that wouldn't be easily broken. He saw intelligence that would find a way regardless of obstacles. He saw the same fire that had burned in his own father, Sarah's grandfather, a black man who'd been sold south for teaching other enslaved black people to write their names. "If you're going to do this," Samuel said slowly, "you have to be smarter than everyone around you. You have to learn in secret. You have to never let white folks see what you know. Can you do that? Can you carry knowledge like a hidden weapon, never drawing it until the moment is right?" "Yes, Papa, I can do that." And she did. For the next 3 years, this black child found ways to observe Elizabeth's reading lessons. She memorized letters and their sounds. She practiced writing in secret, her dark fingers using charred sticks on pieces of bark that she could quickly destroy if anyone approached. When her mother brought home newspapers used to wrap food from the main house, Sarah studied them by candlelight, this black girl slowly decoding the words white people used to describe black people as property, as inferior, as suited only for bondage. By age 10, she could read simple texts. By 12, she was reading the Bible that Mr. Crawford left in the study, discovering passages about liberation that white preachers never mentioned in their sermons to enslaved people. By 15, this black teenager could read as well as most white adults on the plantation. But Sarah understood something crucial that would shape the rest of her life. A black woman with knowledge hoarded was knowledge wasted. She could read, yes, but what did that accomplish if she was the only one? If she truly wanted to be dangerous to the system that enslaved black people, she needed to multiply her resistance. She needed to create an army of literate black people who could think for themselves, who could understand the documents that defined their legal status, who could write their own passes if escape became possible. Black literacy wasn't just personal liberation, it was collective resistance against white supremacy. The idea came to her on a Sunday evening in late spring of 1828 when she was 27 years old. The Thornton plantation, like most in Virginia, permitted enslaved black people Sunday afternoons for rest. Some used the time to tend small garden plots. Others fished in the creek that ran through the property. Many gathered for prayer meetings in the old tobacco barn, these black Christians singing hymns that carried double meanings, songs about freedom disguised as songs in heaven, African rhythms hidden beneath Christian melodies. These prayer meetings were tolerated because they seemed to reinforce the religious messages that white preachers used to support slavery. Messages about black obedience, black servitude, black suffering in this world for reward in the next. But what if those prayer meetings could become something else? What if, hidden within the hymns and prayers, there could be lessons? What if Sarah could teach other black people what she'd taught herself? The risk was enormous. Discovery would mean certain punishment for this black woman, possibly death. Virginia's laws against teaching black people to read had grown stricter after Denmark Vesey's conspiracy in South Carolina, and they would grow even stricter after Nat Turner's rebellion in 1831. The white establishment understood that black literacy enabled black resistance. A black person who could read might read abolitionist newspapers written by black and white abolitionists, might read about successful escapes, might forge freedom papers. The system of white supremacy required black ignorance to function smoothly. But Sarah decided the risk was worth it. She began slowly, carefully. She approached Moses, a black man about her age who worked in the tobacco fields. Moses was intelligent, curious, and trustworthy. This black man whose dark hands could coax life from soil, but who'd never been permitted to learn letters. More importantly, he had a young daughter, Clara, a black child with bright eyes and quick mind. And Sarah knew that black parents, desperate to give their children advantages, would take risks they might not take for themselves. "I want to teach you to read," Sarah told Moses one Sunday after the prayer meeting had ended. They stood outside the tobacco barn, evening light filtering through pine trees, two black people discussing revolution in whispers. Moses looked at her with a mixture of hope and fear, this black man understanding both the gift she offered and the danger it carried. "Sarah, you know what they'd do to us if they caught us, what they do to black folks who learn to read." "I know what they do to us every day already," Sarah replied, this black woman's voice carrying quiet fury. "They work us until our black bodies break. They sell our black children. They beat us for the smallest infractions. They've already done the worst things imaginable to black people. But there's one thing they can't do once we learn to read. They can't keep us ignorant. They can't control what we know, what we think, what we dream about for our children's futures. Black literacy is black power." "If I learn to read," Moses said slowly, this black father thinking of his daughter, "could I teach Clara?" "You could teach Clara, and she could teach her children, and they could teach theirs. We can create something that survives beyond us. We black people can plant seeds that grow into forests. We can pass knowledge down through black generations until someone, someday, is free enough to use it fully." Moses was quiet for a long moment, this black man weighing freedom against safety, possibility against risk. Finally, he nodded. "When do we start?" They started the following Sunday. Just two black people at first, Moses and Sarah, meeting in the tobacco barn after the regular prayer meeting ended. Sarah used a charred stick to write letters on the wall, showing Moses how sounds corresponded to symbols, how those symbols combined into words. This black woman teaching this black man, both of them breaking white Virginia's laws with every letter learned. She brought scraps of newspaper she'd saved, and Moses traced the letters with his dark fingers, sounding out words slowly at first, then with increasing confidence. After 3 weeks, Moses brought his friend Jacob, another black field worker whose sharp mind had been deliberately dulled by years of forced ignorance. Then Jacob brought his cousin Ruth, not Sarah's mother, but another black woman with the same name, whose hands were scarred from years of cotton picking. Within 2 months, 6 black people were meeting every Sunday evening in that abandoned tobacco barn, learning to read by candlelight and moonlight, transforming themselves from property into people who possessed dangerous knowledge. Sarah developed teaching methods refined through trial and error. She couldn't use traditional primers or school books. Those would be impossible for black people to explain if discovered. Instead, she taught using materials that enslaved black people had legitimate reasons to possess. The Bible, which some white owners permitted for religious instruction of black people, though they carefully selected which passages to emphasize. Newspapers used to wrap food or line shelves. Labels from supply barrels. She taught her black students to recognize common words first, practical words like Virginia, tobacco, overseer, freedom, Negro, slave, words that appeared frequently in documents that defined black people's legal status. But Sarah's teaching went beyond mechanical literacy. This black woman taught critical thinking, encouraging her black students to question what they read, to analyze arguments white people made for slavery, to recognize when written words served white power rather than truth. When they read biblical passages about servants obeying masters, Sarah asked them to consider other passages about liberation, justice, the fundamental dignity of all people that white preachers never mentioned when preaching to black congregations. When they read newspapers defending slavery as a natural social order suited to black people's supposed limitations, Sarah taught them to identify logical fallacies, emotional manipulation, racist pseudoscience dressed as objective truth. Reading without thinking, Sarah told her black students, is like farming without planting. You're going through the motions but producing nothing of value. When we black people read, we must ask ourselves, who wrote this? What do they want us to believe? Who benefits if we accept this as truth? Reading is power, but critical reading is freedom. They want us to believe black people are inferior. Our job is to read their words and see the lies. By the end of 1828, 12 black people were attending Sarah's secret school. By mid-1829, the number had grown to 18. By 1830, 27 enslaved black people on the Thornton plantation could read, write, and think critically about the white supremacist world around them. They were careful, extraordinarily careful. These black people never spoke about the lessons where white overseers might hear. They practiced their writing in secret, using materials that could be quickly destroyed. They hid their growing literacy behind masks of ignorance, pretending to be exactly what the white system expected black people to be: illiterate, simple, incapable of complex thought. But knowledge once gained changes how a person moves through the world. The black students in Sarah's secret school began carrying themselves differently. Not obviously, not in ways that would immediately draw white attention, but subtly. They stood a bit straighter. Their dark eyes held more confidence. They asked questions that revealed thinking minds. And some white people began to notice that something had changed among the black workers. The first white person to become suspicious was Benjamin Walker, the plantation's overseer. Walker was a cruel white man who'd built his career on brutalizing black people, believing that enslaved black folks required constant terror to remain productive. He'd worked on the Thornton plantation for 8 years, and he prided himself on knowing every black person under his supervision, knowing their strengths, their weaknesses, their breaking points.
But lately, something felt different among the black workers, though this white man couldn't quite identify what. The enslaved black people seemed less cowed, less broken. When he gave orders, they obeyed as always, but there was a quality in their obedience that troubled him. These black people seemed to be choosing to obey rather than being forced to obey, and that distinction, subtle as it was, suggested a dangerous shift in the psychology of enslaved black people. Walker, this white overseer, began paying closer attention to the quarters where black people lived, listening to conversations, watching for any sign of organized black resistance. He knew about the Sunday prayer meetings in the old tobacco barn, of course, knew that black people gathered there to sing and pray. Those had been happening for years and seemed harmless enough, just enslaved black folks singing hymns and praying to a God who white preachers said approved of black slavery. But Walker's instincts, honed through years of oppressing black people, told him something was wrong. One Sunday evening in October 1830, this white overseer decided to investigate. He waited until after sunset, then walked quietly toward the old tobacco barn where black people gathered. He could hear singing, hymns he recognized, nothing immediately suspicious. But then the singing stopped, and he heard a different sound, a black woman's voice, clear and strong, teaching. He crept closer, peering through gaps in the barn's weathered siding. What this white man saw confirmed his worst fears about black people. Dozens of enslaved black people seated on the ground, their dark faces illuminated by candlelight, watching a black woman draw letters on a piece of slate. These black people were learning to read. These black people were violating Virginia law. These black people were becoming dangerous to white control. Walker's first instinct was to burst into the barn immediately, to catch all these black people in the act, to exact immediate punishment that would remind every black person on the plantation of their place. But then calculation overcame impulse. If this white overseer interrupted now, he'd catch this one group of black people, but he wouldn't know the full extent of the conspiracy. How many black people could read? Who had been attending these lessons? How long had these black people been secretly educating themselves? Better to watch, to gather information, to let these black people continue just long enough to identify everyone involved before bringing down consequences that would serve as lasting warning to every black person on the plantation.
So Walker watched through the gaps in the barn wall, documenting black faces, noting which black people seemed most engaged, which asked questions, which showed natural aptitude that contradicted white people's claims about black intellectual inferiority. And as this white man watched Sarah teach with patience and skill, he felt something he rarely experienced, genuine fear. Not fear of physical rebellion by black people, though that was always a white concern. Fear of something more insidious to white supremacy. These black people were learning to think, and thinking black people were infinitely more dangerous to slavery than merely strong or resentful black people. Walker watched for 3 weeks, never interrupting, gathering evidence against these black people. He saw the lessons evolve from basic letter recognition to simple reading to critical analysis. He heard this black woman, Sarah, encourage her black students to question what they read, to think for themselves, to recognize their own worth as black people despite everything white society told them. And this white overseer understood that what was happening in that tobacco barn represented the most dangerous form of black resistance, intellectual liberation of black minds. On November 14, 1830, Walker made his move. He reported everything to Master Thornton, providing this white plantation owner a detailed account of the secret school where black people were learning, the black attendees, the materials used, the duration of the conspiracy. Thornton listened with growing fury. He was a white man who considered himself a benevolent master, who believed his enslaved black workers were content because he didn't brutalize them quite as much as some white neighbors did, who thought he understood the black people whose labor built his wealth.
The discovery that these black people had been secretly educating themselves for years, right under his white supervision, shattered his comfortable illusions about contented black slavery. "Gather them all," Thornton ordered, "every black person who attended those meetings. Bring them to the main yard tomorrow at dawn. We'll make an example that every black person on this plantation will remember." That night, Walker and 2 other white overseers swept through the quarters where black families lived, pulling black people from their cabins. They arrested 47 black people total, everyone who'd attended Sarah's school regularly. The arrested black people were confined in the tobacco barn, ironically the same place where they'd been learning freedom's first lessons, while white guards were posted to prevent escape. Inside the barn, fear saturated the air like moisture. Everyone knew punishment was coming for these black people. The question was what form white vengeance would take. Sarah stood among her black students, and despite the fear she felt, despite knowing what tomorrow might bring for a black woman who'd taught other black people to read, she also felt something unexpected: pride. Looking around the barn at black faces she'd taught, seeing the literacy these black people had gained, the confidence they'd developed, the critical thinking skills they'd honed, she understood that whatever happened next, they'd already achieved something that couldn't be undone. These black people could read. They could think. They possessed knowledge that would persist even if black bodies were broken, even if they were sold away, even if the worst occurred. "I'm sorry," Moses whispered to her in the darkness, this black man's voice heavy with guilt. "I'm sorry I brought my friends. I'm sorry we grew the group too large. This is my fault." "No," Sarah said firmly, this black woman's voice carrying strength despite circumstances. "This isn't anyone's fault except theirs. We black people didn't create this system. We didn't make laws against black literacy. We didn't decide that reading should be a crime for black people. We only decided that we black folks deserved to be educated, that we deserved to understand the world, that we deserved to think. If that's a crime, then the law is wrong, not us black people." Around them, other black people echoed her sentiments. Jacob, a black field worker with scarred, dark hands, spoke about how learning to read had changed his understanding of himself as a black man, how he'd always been told that black people were inferior, suited only for labor. But reading had shown him the lie in that racist message. Ruth, a black woman with graying hair, described teaching her daughter to recognize letters, passing forward the gift Sarah had given her to the next generation of black children. One by one, black people shared what literacy had meant to them, and Sarah understood that regardless of tomorrow's punishment, tonight they were free in the ways that mattered most. Dawn came with the slow inevitability of judgment. The white guards opened the barn doors, and the 47 arrested black people were marched to the main yard, where the entire black population of the plantation had been assembled. Master Thornton stood on the main house steps, his white face rigid with fury. Beside him stood Walker, this white overseer wearing an expression of grim satisfaction. The other enslaved black people watched from a distance, fear and sympathy mixing in their dark eyes as they looked at their arrested brothers and sisters. "You all know why we're here," Thornton began, his white voice carrying across the yard to the assembled black people. "These 47 committed crimes. These black people learned to read. Worse, these black people conspired to educate themselves in secret, deliberately deceiving those of us responsible for maintaining order among you people.
Such behavior by black people cannot be tolerated. It won't be tolerated on my plantation." He paused, letting the words settle like stones in still water, making sure every black person understood the message. "I've decided to sell 30 of them. These black people will be transported south, separated, sent to plantations where their dangerous ideas can't spread to other black people. The remaining 17 will be whipped, 50 lashes each, so they remember the cost of black defiance." Murmurs rippled through the assembled black crowd. Black families would be separated.
Black husbands torn from black wives, black children from black parents. The cruelty was calculated, designed to inflict maximum suffering on black people and serve as maximum deterrent to other black people. But there's one person, Thornton continued, his white eyes fixing on Sarah, who bears special responsibility. Sarah was the teacher. This black woman initiated this conspiracy. She spread the infection of literacy among you people deliberately, knowingly, with full understanding of the consequences. Her punishment must be proportional to her crime. Sarah stood motionless, this black woman meeting the white man's gaze without flinching. She'd known from the moment of arrest that she, as a black woman who'd taught other black people, would bear the brunt of white punishment. She'd accepted that likelihood when she'd started teaching 3 years earlier. Freedom for black people always carried a price, and she'd decided the price was worth paying. Sarah will receive 100 lashes, Thornton announced to the assembled black people. Then she'll be sold south to a plantation in Louisiana where this black woman will never see Virginia or her black family again. Let this serve as lesson to every black person here. Education is not your right. You black people exist to labor, not to think. Anyone who forgets that will share this black woman's fate. The whipping post stood in the center of the yard, a permanent fixture used regularly for punishing black people. Sarah was taken to it, this black woman's dark hands bound to the post's iron ring. Walker stood ready with the whip, a leather instrument designed to tear black flesh. Sarah closed her eyes, not in fear, but in preparation. This black woman knew what was coming. She'd seen other black people whipped. She understood the agony that awaited her black body. But she also understood something more important. Pain was temporary, but what she'd taught these black people would endure. The first lash fell across Sarah's dark back, and this black woman bit back a scream. The second followed immediately, then the third. By the 10th lash, blood was soaking through her dress, this black woman's blood testament to white cruelty. By the 20th, she'd lost the ability to remain silent, her screams echoing across the plantation, the sound of a black woman's agony filling the air. But even through the torture, even as her black body endured systematic destruction, Sarah's mind remained clear. She thought about her black students, about the words these black people could now read, about the critical thinking skills these black minds had developed, about the seeds of black liberation she'd planted. At lash 47, Sarah lost consciousness, this black woman's body finally succumbing. Walker paused, waiting to see if she'd revive. When she didn't, this white overseer ordered cold water thrown on her, bringing this black woman gasping back to awareness. The whipping continued, this white man determined to complete the full punishment of this black woman's black body. Each lash was measured, delivered with deliberate cruelty, designed to maximize suffering while avoiding death. At lash 73, Sarah's voice, weak and raw from screaming, began to speak. Not pleas for mercy, not cries of pain, words. This black woman was reciting the alphabet, teaching even as her black body was destroyed by white violence. A, B, C, D, she whispered, her black voice barely audible, but clear enough for those black people standing closest to hear. E, F, G, H. The alphabet became prayer, became resistance, became testament to the fact that this black woman's spirit remained unbroken, even as her black flesh was torn apart by a white man's whip. Some in the watching black crowd began to weep. Others looked away, unable to witness the brutality inflicted on this black woman. But Sarah's students, the 47 black people who'd learned in her secret school, watched with eyes that burned. These black people watched and remembered. They saw what the cost of black literacy could be, but they also saw that even under ultimate physical duress, even facing death, their black teacher valued education enough to continue teaching. In that moment, Sarah became more than a black woman. She became a symbol, a living testament to black resistance's power. The 100th lash finally fell across this black woman's destroyed back. Sarah hung from the post, barely conscious, her black body a mass of torn flesh and blood. 2 black men were ordered to cut her down, carrying this black woman to the medical cabin, where Ruth, her mother, waited with what limited supplies she had for treating such injuries to black bodies. The plantation physician, a white Dr. Matthews, was summoned, but he made it clear his involvement was minimal. Enslaved black people were expected to survive or die based on their own constitution. Medical care for black people was an expense Master Thornton resented, particularly for a black woman he planned to sell anyway. For 3 days, Sarah lingered between life and death, this black woman's broken body fighting to survive. Her mother tended her constantly, this black woman cleaning her daughter's wounds, applying poultices made from African healing knowledge, praying over her child's broken black body.
Ruth had watched the whipping, had heard her black daughter reciting the alphabet through her agony, and she understood with terrible clarity what Sarah had sacrificed. This black woman had chosen this. She'd known the risks and proceeded anyway because she'd decided some things mattered more than this black woman's personal safety. Black education mattered. Black freedom mattered. Planting seeds in black minds that would grow into forests mattered, even if this black woman wouldn't live to see those forests mature. On the 4th day, Sarah regained consciousness, this black woman's mind returning, even though her black body was destroyed. Her dark back was ruined, would never fully heal, would carry scars as permanent testimony to what this black woman had endured for teaching other black people. But her mind remained sharp, and when she could finally speak, her first words were a question. Did the students survive? Are our black people alive? 17 were whipped, Ruth told her, tears streaming down this black woman's face. 30 black people are being sold, transported south within the week. But they're alive, Sarah. Our black people are alive, and they remember what you taught them. You saved these black people in ways that matter more than physical survival. Sarah closed her eyes, this black woman absorbing this information. 30 black people would be sold away, scattered across the South. Black bodies separated from black families and everything familiar. But wherever these black people went, they'd carry literacy with them. They'd carry critical thinking skills. They'd carry the knowledge that they were fully human black people, deserving of education, capable of learning anything. That knowledge couldn't be beaten out of black bodies or sold away from black minds. It was permanent, eternal, more powerful than chains that bound black people. "Mama," Sarah whispered, this black woman's voice weak but determined, "I need you to remember something. I need you to pass this forward to other black people." "What, baby? What do you need me to remember?" "Tell them that black education is black resistance. Tell them that black people learning to read is fighting back. Tell them that every word we decode, every sentence we understand, every idea we question is an act of war against the white system that tries to keep black minds ignorant. Tell them I died teaching black people, and I die teaching again, because some things are worth any cost to black freedom." Ruth nodded, memorizing her black daughter's words. She understood she was receiving a legacy, a mission to continue what this black woman Sarah had started. Ruth herself couldn't read,
had never attended the secret school because her work serving white people in the main house kept her too closely supervised. But this black woman could remember. She could preserve Sarah's message and pass it forward to other black people who came after.
Sarah survived her injuries, though her recovery took months. This black woman would never regain full health. The whipping had damaged muscles and nerves in ways that meant permanent pain, limited mobility, constant reminder of what this black woman's black body had endured for teaching other black people. But she'd survived, and survival itself was a form of black victory. Master Thornton had intended to make an example of this black woman, to demonstrate that black resistance brought unbearable consequences. Instead, this white man had created a black martyr, a black woman whose suffering elevated her message rather than destroying it. The sale, however, proceeded as planned. In January of 1831, Sarah was transported south. This black woman sold to a sugar plantation in Louisiana's sweltering Delta region. The journey took 3 weeks, traveling by wagon and riverboat, this black woman shackled to other black people being sold south. The conditions were brutal, designed to break black spirits and reinforce property status. Many black people didn't survive the journey. Those black people who did arrived broken in body, if not entirely broken in spirit. The Louisiana plantation where Sarah was sold operated differently from Virginia tobacco farms. Sugar cultivation required different rhythms, different labor patterns, different cruelties inflicted on black bodies. The work was harder, the heat more oppressive, the death rate higher for black workers. Enslaved black people on sugar plantations rarely lived past 40. The brutal mathematics of sugar production meant white owners calculated whether working black people to death produced more profit than maintaining black bodies for longer lives. The calculation usually favored death for black workers. Sarah was assigned to field work despite her injuries, despite this black woman's limited mobility. The overseer, a white man named Pierce, had no sympathy for damaged black goods purchased cheap. If this black woman couldn't meet quotas, she'd be punished further. If this black woman died, well, she'd been purchased at discount price anyway. Her value was measured in how much sugar this black woman could help produce before her black body gave out completely. But even in Louisiana, even working in conditions designed to destroy black body and black spirit, Sarah found ways to continue her mission. This black woman worked alongside other black people, many transported from upper South states like Virginia and Maryland, others born into Louisiana's particular brand of brutal slavery inflicted on black people. During rare rest periods, during the brief minutes between brutal labor and collapse into exhausted sleep, Sarah talked. This black woman told stories about Virginia. She described the secret school where black people had learned to read. She shared what she'd taught, not through formal lessons anymore. Her black body was too damaged for that. But through conversation, through example, through maintaining her dignity and intelligence despite everything white supremacy tried to do to black people. Other black people on the Louisiana plantation began to seek her out. They recognized something in this black woman that inspired them. Despite the scars on her dark back, despite the limited mobility, despite working in hell itself, Sarah carried herself with quiet dignity that suggested unbroken spirit. These other black people wanted to understand how this black woman maintained her humanity in circumstances designed to destroy black humanity. "They tried to break me," Sarah told a young black woman named Hannah one evening. "White men beat me, sold me, tried to destroy me for teaching black people to read. But they couldn't break what matters. They couldn't break my mind. They couldn't destroy my understanding that we black people are fully human, deserving of education, capable of anything. That knowledge lives in me, and I carry it like a flame they can't extinguish." Hannah was 19, a black woman born on this Louisiana plantation, who'd never known anything but sugar cultivation and white brutality inflicted on black people. "But how?" she asked. "How do you keep believing black people are worth something when everything tells us we're nothing?" "Because lies don't become truth through repetition," Sarah said, this older black woman's voice carrying certainty despite exhaustion. "White people tell us black people are inferior. They write it in their newspapers, preach it in their churches, encode it in their laws. But their need to constantly insist on black inferiority reveals their uncertainty. If we black people were truly inferior, they wouldn't need to work so hard to convince everyone. The very existence of laws against black literacy proves they fear black intelligence, fear what black people might become if we had the same opportunities white people have." These conversations with other black people became Sarah's new form of teaching. She couldn't conduct formal lessons, her black body was too broken and the Louisiana overseers too vigilant. But this black woman could plant seeds, ask questions, encourage other black people to think critically about the white world that enslaved them. She told stories about the secret school, about the 47 black people who'd learned to read, about how some of those black people had been sold south like her, but carried literacy with them, spreading black education wherever they went. "You're part of something larger," Sarah told the black people who sought her wisdom. "Every black person who learns to read, every black mind that learns to think critically, every black spirit that refuses to be broken adds to a tide that will eventually overwhelm this system. We may not live to see black freedom, but we're building the foundation for black people who come after us. That's what matters. That's what they can't destroy no matter what they do to our black bodies." 2 years after her arrival in Louisiana, Sarah met a black man named Isaac who'd been transported from South Carolina. Isaac was 35, scarred and strong, this black man's dark body marked by years of brutal field labor. But his mind remained sharp, and when he heard about the black woman who'd been whipped for teaching black people to read, he sought her out. "I heard what you did in Virginia," Isaac said when they finally spoke privately. "Teaching black people. They say you took 100 lashes and still recited the alphabet." "They say correctly," Sarah replied, this black woman's scarred back testament to truth. "My brother learned to read," Isaac continued, this black man's voice heavy with emotion. "A black man in Charleston taught him before they both were sold. My brother used that education to forge a pass and escape north. He's free now, living in Pennsylvania, a free black man. And it all started because another black person taught him to read, just like you taught those people in Virginia." Sarah felt something stir in her chest, this black woman's exhausted spirit lifting. "Your brother made it? He's free?" "Free," Isaac confirmed, "and he's not the only one. There are thousands of free black people in the North. There are black communities, black churches, black schools. Black people living as human beings deserve to live. And every black person who learns to read, who develops their mind, who refuses to be broken by slavery, adds to that tide of black freedom." This conversation rekindled something in Sarah, this black woman's sense of purpose that had dimmed under Louisiana's brutal conditions. She began seeking out other black people more actively, sharing her story, encouraging black literacy through whatever means possible. She taught a black man named Thomas to recognize letters by drawing them in the dirt during brief rest periods. She helped a black woman named Esther understand that the words white overseers used to demean black people were lies, not truth. But Sarah's black body, already damaged by the whipping, couldn't withstand Louisiana's brutal labor conditions. The heat, the endless work, the inadequate food, the constant brutality white overseers inflicted on black bodies all took their toll. By the summer of 1833, this black woman's health was failing rapidly. The plantation's white physician examined her perfunctorily and told the white overseer she probably had 6 months at most. When Sarah learned she was dying, this black woman felt no regret. She'd accomplished what mattered. She'd taught 47 black people to read in Virginia. She'd inspired others in Louisiana.
She'd planted seeds of black liberation that would continue growing long after this black woman's body returned to Earth.
Her life had meant something. Her resistance had mattered. In September of 1833, Sarah called together the small group of black people she'd been mentoring in Louisiana. Her black body was failing, barely able to move, but her mind remained clear. "I'm dying," she told them. These black people gathered around this dying black woman's pallet. "But before I go, I need you to promise something. Promise me you'll continue this work. Teach other black people whenever you can. Pass forward what you've learned. Keep the flame of black education burning. They can destroy my black body, but they can't destroy the ideas I've planted in black minds. Those ideas will outlive slavery itself." "We promise," they said, these black people understanding they were receiving a sacred responsibility. "Remember," Sarah continued, "this dying black woman using her last strength to deliver final lessons. Black education is black resistance. Black literacy is black power. Black critical thinking is black freedom. Every word you learn, every idea you question, every moment you refuse to believe white lies about black inferiority, you're fighting back. You're building black liberation, one mind at a time." Sarah died on September 23, 1833, at age 32. This black woman's body was buried in an unmarked grave in Louisiana soil, alongside hundreds of other black people who'd been worked to death in sugar fields. No monument marked her resting place. No newspaper recorded her passing. The white world that had enslaved this black woman noted her death only as a property loss, one unit of black labor removed from plantation records. But the black people who'd known her remembered. They told her story to other black people. They passed forward what this black woman had taught them. They continued the work of black education, black resistance, black liberation that Sarah had started. In Virginia, the black people Sarah had taught in the secret school continued spreading literacy. Moses taught his daughter Clara, that young black girl growing into a young black woman who taught others. Jacob, sold to Alabama, taught other black people there. Ruth, sold to Georgia, carried black literacy with her and passed it forward. Each of Sarah's students became teachers themselves, creating a network of black education that spread across the South, despite laws, despite punishment, despite white efforts to keep black people ignorant. By 1860, historians estimate that 20 to 30% of enslaved black people in the Upper South had achieved some level of literacy, despite laws prohibiting black education. Most had learned in secret, taught by other black people who'd learned from others, a chain of black knowledge that stretched back to people like Sarah who'd risked everything. When the Civil War came, literate black people played crucial roles. Black soldiers who could read and write served as clerks, scouts, intelligence gatherers. Black people who'd educated themselves in secret helped establish black schools after emancipation. The seeds that black people like Sarah had planted grew into forests of black education, black empowerment, black freedom. Today, Sarah's name is largely forgotten. No monuments commemorate this black woman's sacrifice. But her legacy lives in every black person who values education, who understands that literacy is power, who refuses to accept limitations others try to impose on black minds. Her legacy lives in the historically black colleges and universities that descended from schools established by newly freed black people determined to educate themselves and their black children. Her legacy lives in every black person who reads critically, thinks independently, questions white supremacist narratives that persist long after slavery's legal end. Sarah's story reminds us that resistance takes many forms. This black woman didn't lead an armed rebellion. She didn't escape to freedom herself. She taught. She educated. She planted seeds of black liberation in black minds. And that teaching, that education, that seed planting proved more powerful than any weapon. Her story reminds us that black people were never passive victims of slavery.
They resisted constantly, creatively, courageously. They maintained families against efforts to destroy black families. They preserved African traditions despite prohibitions. They educated themselves despite laws against black literacy. They held on to their humanity despite everything white supremacy did to deny black humanity. Sarah's story reminds us that one person can make a difference. This black woman, born enslaved, denied formal education herself, taught 47 black people to read. Those 47 taught hundreds more. Those hundreds taught thousands. The ripples from this one black woman's courage spread across generations, transforming black lives, advancing black freedom, proving that black resistance matters even when victory seems impossible. Her story reminds us that education is liberation. The white establishment that built and maintained slavery understood this. That's why they made black literacy illegal. That's why they punished black people so brutally for learning to read. They knew that educated black people were dangerous black people, dangerous to white supremacy, dangerous to slavery, dangerous to every lie that justified black bondage. Sarah understood this too. That's why she taught. That's why she risked everything. That's why she died believing her sacrifice mattered. As we conclude this story, consider what Sarah's life means for us today. Consider how black people fought for education when education was forbidden. Consider how they valued literacy enough to risk death for it. Consider how they understood that black minds were weapons more powerful than any physical tools of resistance. Sarah lived in chains, but she died a hero.
This black woman transformed illiteracy into literacy, ignorance into knowledge, despair into hope. She taught black people that they were fully human, deserving of education, capable of anything. She planted seeds that grew into forests. She lit flames that white violence couldn't extinguish. She proved that one black woman's courage could change the world. Her story is not unique. Across the South, black people like Sarah taught in secret, risking everything to spread black education. Most of their names are lost to history, but their legacy persists. They built the foundation for black freedom. They created networks of black knowledge. They demonstrated black resistance power. They proved that black people would never stop fighting for liberation, would never accept the limitations white supremacy tried to impose, would never surrender their humanity regardless of what was done to their bodies. We honor Sarah's memory not through monuments or ceremonies, but through continuing the work she started. We honor this black woman by valuing education, by thinking critically, by questioning systems that perpetuate inequality, by recognizing that literacy remains power, that education remains liberation, that black minds remain dangerous to white supremacy. We honor her by teaching our children, by spreading knowledge, by refusing to accept ignorance, by understanding that every person who learns, who thinks, who questions, who grows, continues the resistance that black people like Sarah began. Sarah's story reminds us that ancestors matter. This black woman who died in 1833 influences 2024. Her courage echoes through generations. The seeds she planted continue growing. The flames she lit continue burning. The black liberation she fought for continues advancing. Still incomplete, but unstoppable. Built on foundations that black people like Sarah created with their blood, their sacrifice, their unbreakable commitment to black freedom. So remember Sarah. Remember this black woman who was born in chains but refused to let those chains bind her mind. Remember this black teacher who transformed 47 lives and, through those lives, transformed thousands more. Remember this black hero who faced 100 lashes and used her last conscious breaths to recite the alphabet, teaching until the very end.
Remember that Black resistance has always existed, has always mattered, has always advanced Black freedom even when progress seemed impossible. And carry forward her legacy. Educate yourselves. Educate others. Think critically. Question everything. Recognize your worth. Refuse limitations others try to impose. Understand that you are part of a long chain of Black resistance, Black courage, Black determination that stretches back through centuries and will continue forward through generations yet unborn. You are heirs to Sarah's courage. You carry her fire. You continue her work.
If this story moved you, if Sarah's courage inspired you, if you understand now how Black people fought for education when education was forbidden, then subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell. We uncover forgotten stories of Black resistance, Black courage, Black excellence every week. These are the histories that textbooks often ignore, the Black lives that changed the world, the ancestors whose sacrifices made our present possible. Share this video with someone who needs to hear about real courage, real resistance, real Black heroism. Leave a comment telling us what Sarah's story means to you and how it challenges you to think differently about education, resistance, and Black liberation. These stories matter. These Black lives matter. This history matters. And together, through remembering truthfully and honoring genuinely, we ensure that people like Sarah are never forgotten, that their sacrifices continue inspiring, that their legacy continues advancing Black freedom. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video where we'll uncover another chapter of Black history that deserves to be remembered and celebrated.